All right, so let's look at chapter 12 in A&P 1. So this chapter looks at the spinal cord. Now, for the next couple of chapters, I've combined chapters 12 and 14, and I've also combined chapters 13 and 14 because chapter 12 deals mainly with the anatomy of the spinal cord, and then 14 goes into integration with the spinal cord. I've just combined those things. All right, so looking at spinal cord, let's take a look at the functions of the spinal cord. One is conduction. So it's going to conduct impulses up and down the cord. So out from our brain, out to the body, from the body up to the brain. Next is locomotion. So here the brain sets the motion of the limbs. The spinal cord keeps a pattern. So if you start walking, your brain sets the motion, your spinal cord keeps that pattern going. And also reflexes will go through our spinal cord. So before we get onto the spinal cord, I want to talk about meninges. So meninges are membranes that surround the brain and the spinal cord. And they protect the brain and spinal cord. So the outermost layer is called the dura mater. All right. So this is the outermost layer of the meninges. All right. And it's made of a tough fibrous connective tissue. And anytime we have a tough fibrous connective tissue covering around an organ, it's going to prevent infections from spreading to that organ. And this is our main defense here of our brain and spinal cord, is actually to prevent pathogens from getting into it. It's really hard to get them out after the fact. Next is arachnoid mater. So this right there is arachnoid mater. So this is a middle layer of the meninges. That arachnoid mater kind of has a web-like pattern to it, and so that's why they call it arachnoid mater. The next layer, which is directly on the brain and spinal cord, is that's called the pia mater, and that's the innermost layer of the meninges. And as I said, it's directly on the brain and spinal cord. So between the arachnoid mater and the pia mater is a little space there, and that's known as the subarachnoid space. And that subarachnoid space contains cerebral spinal fluid, CSF. Okay, let's take a look at the anatomy of the spinal cord. So if we go to this picture here, gross anatomy here, there are 31 segments. So this is a segment, that's a segment, that's a segment. Each segment has a pair of spinal nerves. All right. We have a cervical enlargement, and that's because we have a lot of nerves coming out to our upper limbs. And we have a lumbar enlargement here, and that's because we have a lot of nerves coming out to those lower limbs. All right. If we look at this cross-section of the spinal cord, we see this butterfly-shaped structure there, and that is where the gray matter is. Now, in general, gray matter has little myelin in there. This contains the cell bodies, the dendrites, and axons of neurons. It is a site of synaptic contact between neurons, all right? So the site of integration occurring there, okay? Next is white matter. So all this out here is the white matter. So in general, white matter has myelin, and so it contains tracts, and tracts are going to carry signals from one part of the central nervous system to another, all right? So this is a site of conduction, all right? So we're sending impulses here. All right, so let's look at this picture here, which is showing these spinal tracts. So we have ascending tracts, which are shown here in green. These are tracts that are going to conduct sensory input to the brain. Now, if we look at a pathway, so this is trying to show a pathway, all I want you to know here is that there are only 3 neurons from where that sensory information comes in to where it ends up in our brain. Now we have descending tracts. So we go to this picture here. These are trying to highlight some descending tracts. These are tracts that conduct motor impulses from the brain to effectors. Now, all I want you to notice on here is there are just 2 neurons coming back to the effectors. All right? Now, some of these, what you notice with most of these, is most of these are contralateral. And that's where the origin and the destination of the tract are on opposite sides of the body. So this is the origin, since this is motor, and then it's going to cross over here and go to the other side of the body. So if this is on the left side, it comes out to a right muscle. That's contralateral. Where some tracts are what we call ipsilateral. And that's where the origin and the destination of the track are on the same side of the body. So if I touch something hot, I'm jerking away from that. That's going to be on the same side of the body. That's an ipsilateral. All right, let's take a look at reflexes. So reflexes, a reflex is an automatic response to a stimulus. So let's look at the properties of a reflex. One is that they require stimulation. Two, they're quick. There's few, if any, interneurons are being used. They are involuntary, so they're not consciously controlled. And they're stereotyped, meaning that they occur the same way every time. This is showing a reflex arc. So a reflex arc, we're going to start off with somatic receptors. Sometimes, that receptor can be something else, but that's in the skin, muscle, or tendon. And then we're going to have a sensory neuron, shown here in green. All right. And then we're going to have an integration center. In most cases, this is just one neuron, or one interneuron. Next, we're going to have a motor neuron, and then we're going to have an effector. All right. So if we look at spinal reflexes, these are reflexes whose reflex arcs pass through the spinal cord. We're going to have visceral reflexes, and we're going to save visceral reflexes till chapter 16. All right? So let's look at somatic reflexes. So somatic reflexes are reflexes involving the somatic nervous system. So first is a stretch reflex. So this is when a muscle is stretched, it will contract in response to that. This is going to help maintain our equilibrium, our sense of balance, and also our posture. And this is one of the ones that's used when you go to the doctor and they tap on your patellar ligament. All right, that's going to stretch the rectus femoris, which activates that reflex. So you contract the rectus femoris, that muscle there, and then you lift your leg. All right. Next is a Golgi tendon reflex. This prevents contracting muscles from applying excessive tension to tendons. So this is that Golgi tendon organ, which is found within the tendons, and when that gets stretched too much, well, we're going to reduce the tension there. Next one I mentioned a lot is withdrawal reflex, and this is a quick contraction of the flexor muscle resulting in the withdrawal of a limb from an injurious stimulus. Okay, so you step on a tack, pull your limb off of it, touch something hot, jerk away from it. Those are both withdrawal reflex. And that's going to help prevent further injury. All right? Now, I know it's hard to tell what's going on here because we have a disembodied leg. Further, now we have two disembodied legs. I'm not a big fan of this picture. This is from a different book, so you can tell what's going on here. So this is called the cross extensor reflex. This is a contraction of extensor muscles in the limb opposite from the one that is withdrawn. So, this is one I've kind of already talked about. You step on an injurious stimulus, you're going to have an ipsilateral reflex pulling your leg up. But you're also going to have a contralateral reflex that allows you to balance on your other leg.